Welcome to Watch the Bookerman and to what I'm thinking is going to be a quick introduction to the biggest show of the year. It is Starrcade 2001, the show that everybody's been waiting for, so I'm not going to waste a load of time. I've done everything I need to do admin-wise off screen, so the plan is to just get you straight through to WCW Starrcade. Hopefully nothing going on backstage or any last-minute injuries on house shows to contend with. Everything so far has gone so well, so fingers crossed we get to this pay-per-view without any issues whatsoever. We are now going to the 30th of December 2001 and to the biggest pay-per-view of the year, the return to pay-per-view for WCW. Big Van Vader extended for another 3 months, and yeah, as far as we are concerned, that is absolutely perfect for us. Nobody gets the night off for Starrcade 2001. Of course they do not. Do I get a major band, or we'll do a special set? Maybe that's something I should have dealt with earlier. We'll right click because we are not giving anybody the night off. It's trying to give us a generic venue, and it's unfortunate, but we're going to be in a generic venue for this show. We will have the automatic selection for pay-per-view buyers, completely the same as we were for the Big Bang pay-per-view, but we do have some creative energy stored. We'll get a storyline idea just in case we can give a last boost. No, I'm going to try and get another storyline idea though. Safe bet for Rob Van Dam. A character idea, we'll use that on somebody, and then that's all we've got left. So that is the creative meeting done. Okay, Mike? Nobody asked your opinion. It's a big show of the year. Don't know why you're trying to cause issues with me. The locker room incidents. We've got Fit Finlay doing the training drills. Christian Cage making everybody happy. Tori and Stacey. What? I don't recognise my locker room right now. Okay, so yeah, 2 prickly personalities, understandable. But everything else has gone. I mean, what do I do here? I don't like him. I don't think... We might upset him here, but I don't think he's a good fit for a locker room leader. I don't think it's his place to be there just yet. We are, of course, going to address and try to inspire our roster. They're fired up. They are buzzing with anticipation for this huge 9-match card. I'm going to get this booked in the game now for us. Of course, a lot of these people, unfortunately, won't be used, but they'll be there. They'll be watching and using this show as inspiration to do better next year. And I think we're in for a really, really great Starrcade 2001. And in just a few moments, we'll see whether I'm right. So, including tonight's pre-show, we've managed to get absolutely everybody currently employed by the company on the show, which I'm very, very pleased with. Just Shawn Stasiak, who has made the decision to sit out his contract, who is not being used. I've also used as many of my stored creative ideas as I possibly could, one of which was a character idea which I deployed to Mike Awesome, hoping to get him a little bit extra momentum and also get his morale out of the negative. Unfortunately, it was another failure. 2 out of 3 creative ideas have failed for Mike Awesome. Makes me wonder if using them in quick succession does make them more likely to fail, perhaps, because I do believe 2 of them were safe bets that did go on to fail. So he's in a slightly worse position going into his match, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with everything that I've put into the game. So let's go into Starrcade 2001, beginning with a dark match as the fans file into the building. Jimmy Hart struggles when going off script in the segment where he just cuts a promo hyping up Starrcade and announces a huge battle royal that will take place as fans file into the building. The idea was that he's a very good hype man, obviously falling a little bit short tonight, but doesn't matter too much. We're in front of only 15,000 people. Now, I'm pretty sure when we were looking on the choose a venue screen, it told me there were no reasonably sized venues, so we've chose a generic one. And then it's put us somewhere where we've sold out, but in front of half as many people as we were expected to get. I'm not sure if anybody can explain that. I don't want to get the show off on a negative note, but yeah, that's not as many people as I expected to be in the building tonight, and surely I could have chosen a venue that was closer to the 30,000 than just getting a generic one that's only 15, so a little bit disappointed in that, to be fair. But I was originally not going to do a dark match at all. I thought if you didn't get onto the pay-per-view card, then I don't need to just force you onto it, especially when it's 3 hours and it's 9 matches, so it's plenty of wrestling already. But I basically realised that I had exactly 30 wrestlers who weren't being used, so I thought, well, why not? We advance a few storylines and gain heat to them all, showing you that the storylines on Worldwide haven't been quite up to scratch in 2001, but as I say, Worldwide changing in 2002. The original winner that I had planned for this match was Mark Jindrak, who we hadn't seen on screen, and I kind of wanted him booked as a babyface place in this match, eventually lastly eliminating a dominant Sir Nelson Knight, but Hugh Morrus and Vito LaGrasso, of all people, complained about that. So I made the decision in the end to have Mark Jindrak get hopefully the pop of eliminating Sir Nelson Knight on his own, but Hugh Morrus from behind eliminating him and stealing the victory. Probably not getting the fans all that hyped up to see a detested heel win, but out of the people in the match, he is the person who I'm looking to book most strongly. I had Jerry Lynn as the fourth last elimination, or the third last elimination I should say, and I think the rest of it's basically done in terms of overness because I didn't set anything else. If you want to look at the order of elimination, you are free to, but now going into the next segment, this is the actual opening of Starrcade 2001, and we begin with a very average segment, the definition of average to be fair, but a video package which highlights the history of the most prestigious event in the WCW calendar, but also looks at the journey of World Championship Wrestling under the stewardship of Shane McMahon, returning to pay-per-view for the first time since the Big Bang back in May. WCW Starrcade 2001 represents one of the most important nights in the history of the company, and I've just put some random legends as the subject of the video package, the reason being that I didn't want to advance storylines with what I knew probably wouldn't be a fantastic segment. The commentators then introduce viewers to the show, with Stevie Ray stepping into the third position that's normally taken up by Jerry the King Lawler, as he will be in action against Sabu on tonight's show. Stevie Ray puts over the personal element of the main event of tonight's show, but says that unlike Scott Steiner, he has it in him to remain professional, well, for as long as he possibly can. Mike Tenay then tells us everything we can expect to see on Starrcade 2001 tonight, and we are opening with one of the most anticipated matches of the night, perhaps one of the most anticipated matches of the year, a first time ever clash for the United States Championship, and this is where we'll see the first creative finish deployed. I thought it'd been a failure there, but it's actually that Rob Van Dam and Rey Mysterio do not click. A 67 from Rob Van Dam and a 63 from Rey Mysterio. Bear in mind, I just praised them on the last episode for, I think, both being in the 80s or certainly the high 70s. The storyline idea was a success and we gained heat to the storyline because of that, and the creative finish was a success. Thank goodness for that, because, well, I expected more like an 80 to be fair. A 70 is still a good rating, but those individual performances, as Rob Van Dam defeats Rey Mysterio in 10 minutes and 46, I had in mind the Kurt Angle versus Rey Mysterio match from 2002's SummerSlam, and also the fact that Rob Van Dam and Rey Mysterio only had one singles match in reality, and it was around this length, so I just kind of tried to mirror that. Of course, it's backfired because these two don't have chemistry. I'll have to go back and watch that match they had in 2006 to see if that is the case. They were sent out to steal the show, to open the show, and I'm hoping that this isn't the best match on the night. But Rob Van Dam makes defense number 4 of the United States Championship after hitting a frog splash, and it's all about the near falls, the false finishes, and these two being, well, the post-match segment kind of waxes lyrical about this match. It's obviously not delivered. Also, I saw there that the face-face dynamic in here will have also hindered it slightly. It's still a good opener. 70 to open the show is perfectly acceptable, and with anybody else, I'd be pretty pleased with it. Rob Van Dam celebrates a huge win following an extremely close opening match, which set the tone for Starrcade with its fast-paced action, albeit perhaps a little bit clunky because of that lack of chemistry, and this is a segment that is better than the match, which says a lot. RVD celebrates in all 4 corners of the ring before Rey Mysterio returns to his feet. Rey offers Rob a hand of respect, and the idea here is that it's after an epic opening match, one of the greatest openers in Starrcade history, and it's accepted by the United States Champion. Now, it doesn't hit quite so hard when they've just not quite delivered. The commentators say that that match could quite easily have gone either way and put over the two men as some of the best pound for pound wrestlers on the planet. You can tell from that description I was expecting something a little bit better than what we got. Footage from earlier today shows Ric Flair making his arrival at the building ahead of his huge role in tonight's Starrcade main event. The commentators put over the World Heavyweight Championship match between Booker T and Scott Steiner. Of course, Stevie Ray put in his 2 cents in there, given his personal feelings towards this match. Ric Flair will serve as the special guest enforcer at ringside, ensuring that there is a fair fight in tonight's main event. We then get the entrance of the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer. They obviously come through the crowd as they always do. 2, with the Sandman enjoying a pre-match drink and a smoke, his signature entrance with the Singapore cane high in the air. Elsewhere in the crowd, an extreme version of Buff Bagwell, so dressed in street clothes and wearing a, I'm going to say crudely made, but actually I'm thinking this could be merch, so a extremely buff t-shirt, and he has a 6-pack of beers. He's really trying to integrate himself into this Extreme Outsiders group, and he looks fired up ahead of the Extreme Rules match, bringing the beers to ringside, of course, hoping to have a celebratory drink with the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer after the match. And this is the moment where I decided, just before the big 3-on-3 match, we will officially turn Buff Bagwell face. I'm hoping that gets a humoured reaction rather than him coming across as he's taking the mick out of the ECW guys. But the 3-on-3 match, a Extreme Rules match, so plenty of weapons, and the idea here is that Buff Bagwell takes a little bit of punishment that hopefully shows that he's got a bit more grit inside him than we initially expect. Curt Hennig, Big Van Vader, Sandman and Tommy Dreamer, some spots on the outside that basically leave all 4 of them incapacitated. Kanyon then tries to set up a table in the ring, but finds himself the victim of a blockbuster through a table and a 1-2-3. Now we can see that Curt Hennig was the best performer in this match with a 71. I'm going to keep note of that because we will be praising people at the end of the show, as you can with pay-per-views, and so far Curt Hennig is our best performer. The rest almost all around the same level, which is interesting. A hardcore match, and after being pinned by Kanyon in the match they had previously, this is Buff Bagwell getting his revenge, and hopefully a big pop for somebody who I know has been very, very popular in the comments. A good win for them, and Buff Bagwell celebrates in the ring. The Extreme Outsiders returning to join the ring with him, and Buff heads to ringside, bringing in his 6-pack of beers. He wants to celebrate the extreme way by getting drunk. The Sandman takes 1 beer from Buff Bagwell for Tommy Dreamer, then another beer for himself, and then the other 4 also for himself, with a nod that perhaps hints at a slight level of respect from the Extreme Outsiders to Buff Bagwell. They then leave through the crowd, and while Buff Bagwell is left without a can of beer, he does still celebrate the victory. He has, of course, by now ripped his Extreme Outsiders shirt off, but Buff Bagwell, hopefully a feel-good moment. I did say for months and months, trust me with Buff Bagwell, he's going to come back and he's going to be in a better position than he started. You could argue being a mid-card goof maybe isn't better than where he started as our top heel, but I think in terms of his overness and how much people are interested in his character, I think we've done an okay job. And the Odd Couple pairing with the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer to fight off the Triad who are associated with Jerry Lawler. I think that it did work in the end despite my initial reservations. We then head backstage again where Shane McMahon is seen entering his office, but of course it is Arn Anderson in the hot seat tonight. He's looking through some papers, just doing some admin. Shane sticks his head through the door, asking if everything's under control. Of course he wants to be focusing on Lance Storm, but that worry is always going to be there when you are the owner of the company and this is the biggest night of the year. Arn Anderson assures him that he's got everything covered, but he'll let Shane know if anything does go awry throughout the course of the night. He does also advise that Shane goes back to preparing for his match. Now I've noticed a couple of these segments, the Ric Flair one and then this one, don't advance the storylines. I'm probably okay with that. I didn't put like Lance off screen on this, and I didn't put the champion and challenger in screen in the previous one. I don't really mind that. I do think, as I've said before, it makes the segments look neater, but these have been good segments, so we probably could have done with them to add to the heat, to the storylines involved. We then go into the second championship match of the night and the first title change when we get the referee missing Christian Cage becoming the legal man. Chuck Palumbo hits a super kick and then brings Sean O'Haire in. However, Chuck Palumbo is then taken out by Test, who is then clotheslined to the outside by Sean O'Haire. Sean then goes back to the top rope and hits the senton, but the referee will not count it because he isn't aware that Christian Cage is now the legal man. As Sean O'Haire is trying to understand what's going on with the referee, Andrew Martin comes back in the ring. I think I did call him Test a couple of times there, and he hits a big boot, catching Sean O'Haire completely off guard. And hopefully we've seen some great big boots from Test over the years, so really a decapitating boot that does do the job. The real Canadians, as they insist on being introduced as, are the new WCW World Tag Team Champions, and they bring an end to the longest Tag Team Championship reign in WCW history. The match did get the crowd hotter. It was just a regular match, but we sent the competitors to go all out, and we do have two new best performers on the night, Christian Cage and Andrew Martin, both around 80, a lot better than their opponents. Can't take anything away from a historic tag team title reign. Christian Cage returns to the ring to celebrate with Andrew Martin as the real Canadians are handed the World Tag Team Championships, our first of perhaps many title changes on the night. The new champions celebrate as the commentators put over the reign of the longest reigning WCW World Tag Team Champions of all time. Nobody has ever had a reign like Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, and they will go down in the history books. However, tonight belongs to Andrew Martin and Christian Cage. Now, we do note that when Chuck Palumbo is thrown to the outside by Test, he appears to quite seriously injure his arm, and that's something that plays into something later. I do actually need to go back to the booking screen because this was a late edition. As you can see, I've not put it into the notes of the segment, and also the booking of a segment later should take this into account, so I will just sort that out in a second. We then get a fantastic segment with Jerry the King Lawler interviewed, and doing well off script always makes a massive difference. Just the boost that we needed before his match with Sabu. He is asked about the second Extreme Rules match of the night by Scott Hudson. The King says that Sabu is tough, he's scary, and my god is he ugly, but also he's stupid. With that said, that's exactly what makes him dangerous, because tonight Jerry has to face somebody who has nothing between their ears and absolutely nothing to lose. Jerry, however, has everything to prove once again, just like he proved when he beat Tommy Dreamer, just like he proved when he beat the Sandman, and not only did he beat them at their own game. They wanted to fight Jerry on their level, and he did it, and he beat them. Tonight, Sabu is going to find out exactly what they found out. It doesn't matter how extreme you are, because when you're an extremely crappy wrestler, the wrestling royalty in front of you is always going to win. Jerry is then asked about his deal with the Triad and how he felt watching them go down to Buff and the Extreme Outsiders earlier. King says that you must be new around here if you don't know that the King always has an ace up his sleeve, so he's not concerned at all that the Triad were pretty soundly defeated earlier tonight. And given his 2-0 record in WCW so far, who are we to doubt him? A video package then looks back at the history of the National Wrestling Alliance, a poor segment unfortunately. I even put Ric Flair in there to try and give it a little boost. The National Wrestling Alliance's World Heavyweight Championship has been one of the most prestigious championships in the history of the business. Focus, of course, on Dusty Rhodes' reigns as champion, and in the past year, Steve Corino has held the championship for pretty much the entirety of it. And footage shows some of his defences in various independent promotions around the world. Perhaps they're hinting at the fall from grace that the organisation has had. Tonight, the son of a plumber will challenge him for the title as Dustin Rhodes, the natural, steps up against the king of old school, Steve Corino. The commentators note that the last time the NWA World Heavyweight Championship was defended at a Starrcade event was all the way back in 1990, and we go into the fourth match of the night, and it is designed to tell a specific story. It's a decent match overall. I will say a 66 is probably about where I expected. Dustin doing well, Corino pretty average as he has been throughout his entire run here, and it's a little bit disappointing. Of course, Steve does not have his security guard, but does have Dawn Marie at ringside, and the finish comes when Dustin has Steve set up for the Shattered Dreams, but at this point Dawn Marie comes in, and while the referee is trying to release Steve from the position that basically he's going to get kicked in the nuts, Dawn Marie low blows Dustin, which then allows Corino to take back control once he is free from the turnbuckle. But coming out from the back to try and point out this cheating to the referee, Dusty Rhodes is arguing with the referee, and this actually allows Steve Corino to hit Dustin Rhodes with the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and then the old school expulsion. He pins him for the 1, 2, 3. However, Dusty Rhodes points out to the referee that Dustin Rhodes' foot is on the rope, and while the referee's hand does come down for the third count, he does notice at the same time that Dustin's foot is on the rope, so doesn't call for the bell. Steve Corino gets up. He wants to know what's going on. So I've just noticed back-to-back matches have a similar referee miscommunication. Is what it is. I didn't spot that when I was booking forwards because I've rearranged the matches, but Steve Corino thinks he has it. He leaves the ring, he pushes Dusty Rhodes, grabs the belt from the canvas, and he's just going to hit Dustin with it right in front of the referee and get disqualified. However, when Corino gets back in the ring, Dusty Rhodes grabs the belt from him, and in the scuffle, he falls back into a lifting reverse DDT from Dustin Rhodes, who is able to pin the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. I promise that not all the finishes on tonight's show are going to be as complicated as these ones. The first two matches were nice and straightforward. These two have been a little bit more convoluted. Dustin Rhodes wins the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Championship, and it's all about this post-match segment. Dusty Rhodes entering the ring. Of course, he has the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in his hands, so as Dustin Rhodes has his arm raised in the air, Dusty Rhodes hands his son the NWA World Heavyweight Championship belt, which he once held all those years ago. This is put over as a very emotional moment for the two men. It's based on their dramatic acting, so whether they are emotional or not, we are going to have them put that across. The commentators put over this moment as the father and son hug in the ring, and the end of Steve Corino's pretty lackluster NWA World Heavyweight Championship reign. I'm going to be honest, this storyline went nothing like what I expected, and I'm just glad to have it over, to be honest. But it was still an interesting feature match on WCW Starrcade, I think. But we will be moving away from having any NWA presence on WCW in 2002, because it just didn't work how I hoped it would, basically, and there's no shame in admitting when you're wrong. After the commentators give us a preview of what is yet to come, we see Diamond Dallas Page and Mike Awesome in the back as they prepare for their match with one another. Going to the locker room of DDP, we can see him celebrating the victory of his friend from the previous match. Meanwhile, we see Lance Storm approach Mike Awesome. Storm says that he wants to wish Mike luck in his match tonight against DDP, and just wants to double check that he's still on board with the plan for tonight. Mike sort of stares off into the distance, looks a little bit solemn, but nods at Lance Storm. It's like he knows what he has to do for Lance, but wants to maintain the focus of his match before getting into anything like that. The fact that a 67 does advance and gain heat to the storyline probably does say quite a bit about how lackluster this storyline has been, but I'm hoping that their match later in the night can deliver. We then go into, have we had that note before? Mike Tenay and Stevie Ray are an awkward pair on commentary, or have we just realised after 5 matches that it's really not working? We get the crowd buzzing, the colour commentary gives the match a boost, so is that credit to Don Callis there, who's sort of trying to do his best in amongst a bit of a mess between these two. Is there a way we can take Stevie Ray out of the rest of the show without it being too... Probably not. I'm just going to have to deal with it unless I do something before the main event where perhaps he gets into a scuffle with Scott Steiner, and then that gives us a reason to pull him. Yeah, I think we're going to go back to the booking screen and remove him as commentary from the main event, and then we'll just say that there was a altercation during Scott Steiner's... No, I don't think I will, actually. I'm just going to accept that it might knock a point off the show. Now, this is a mayhem match, and... Okay, so I said we were going to have more simple booking, and then we go straight into an Extreme Rules match, which has an unprecedented amount of interference. But the idea is essentially that Jerry Lawler calls for his backup, so Sir Nelson Knight and Hugh Morrus come out, and they're dealt with by the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer. But then Kanyon comes out, and he's sort of looking around him because it appears that Big Van Vader and Kurt Hennig have refused to come out. But when Kanyon is about to do something to Sabu, Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri send him packing with a double drop kick. Super Crazy does a dive to the outside and they get out of there, which leads us back with Jerry Lawler and Sabu. And Jerry Lawler, we get a little bit of a moment of him on his knees begging, please don't do this to me. Of course, it's going to be a brutal match between these two men. I think the old school style of Jerry Lawler and the quote-unquote modern extreme style of Sabu could mesh really, really well. It's only come out as a 56, which I did hope for a lot better, but an Arabian face buster with a chair through a table does finally give Jerry Lawler his comeuppance after 6 months of bad-mouthing these extremely crappy wrestlers. Now, we'll note that Jerry Lawler was extremely unhappy with the booking of this match. I wasn't bothered in the slightest, to be honest, but if we get a note of him wanting his release or anything, I guess it kind of tracks with him going back to the WWE in 2002 anyway, so yeah, that is what it is. After the match, Sabu raises his arm in the air in his signature pose, having become the first Extreme alumni to defeat Jerry the King Lawler, albeit with help from some of his former colleagues. Jerry the King Lawler is laid completely out cold in the ring, having been through a war with one of the most dangerous men in WCW, and that's what we really want to put over. Jerry Lawler just sort of starfish in the ring, absolutely been to hell and back with Sabu, and as much of the bells and whistles that he tried to put on there to try and get the win was not enough against the homicidal, genocidal, suicidal Sabu. And after a win like this, we really do have to have some direction for Sabu going into 2002. Everything I booked tonight was with what's next for the people in mind, so hopefully we can build on any momentum that we manage to gather on tonight's show. Ric Flair then does a very good job of gaining heat to the World Heavyweight Championship storyline in an interview about the World Heavyweight Championship match in tonight's main event, Booker T versus Scott Steiner, with the World Heavyweight Championship on the line, if I haven't mentioned that quite enough so far. Ric Flair reiterates that his personal feelings will be put aside tonight. He is only focused on ensuring the best possible outcome for WCW going into 2002. He was named honorary lifetime president of this company, and that means that the future of WCW is just as important to him as it is to anybody else. The best way for him to do that is to do his job the right way and only get involved if absolutely necessary. Otherwise, he'll be trusting our referee Charles Robinson to do his job and ensure the best man leaves as the World Heavyweight Champion. So a good promo from Ric Flair there. I can't remember whether I scripted him or not. I would expect that I wouldn't have, because he usually complains if I script him, I think. So yeah, a good segment from Ric Flair nonetheless, as we go into the ladder match, a match which I'm really happy with here, a 72, and a change of pace. I know it's weapons again. I think that's 4 matches tonight that are going to have weapons in them, but not all very different. I think the 3-on-3 was kind of just a fun sort of hardcore garbage match really, but with people who were actually good at wrestling. And then we had the Jerry Lawler Sabu one, which, while it was booked as a mayhem match, it does have that storytelling element of Jerry Lawler being so good at the psychology, him trying to slow it down, and I think that's very different to what we're going to get from Lance Storm and Shane McMahon later on in the night, and very different from this ladder match, which is a high spots rated match. And the finish comes when Sugar Shane has the match in his hands, the title just inches away, when Chavo Guerrero, the man who, if you remember, on one of the very first shows of this series, lost to Sugar Shane and was then out of the Cruiserweight division, well, he does go on to have impact in the World Cruiserweight Championship match at Starrcade all these months later, because he pushes Sugar Shane off the ladder and then assists Juventud Guerrera in climbing up it and retrieving the championship. Now, the initial idea was to have one of the faces win tonight and have a feel-good moment, but I felt we were already changing too many titles on the night, not to give any potential future spoilers away, but we've already had 2 title changes tonight. I didn't just want to do it where you keep belts on people for ages and then do your title changes at Starrcade, because that's something that I've been guilty of in the probably decade plus that I've been playing TW, to be fair. More like 20. I don't even want to think about that. Juventud Guerrera makes defense number 2 of the WCW World Cruiserweight title. But look at this, a 68 from AJ Styles, just 1 point fewer than Sugar Shane, who is one of our well-known wrestlers. So AJ Styles is, I know it's high spots matches, but going to be absolutely incredible in 2002. And I think I'm going to talk about this in the State of the Company video, but if you look where we've come from at the Big Bang, go back and check out that video, even with the dodgy audio quality, and you will see the future of WCW is 10 times brighter than it was at that event. There were dark moments when even I didn't think we were going to come out the other side. So the way this show's going so far, I'm really happy with. But a 72 for the Cruiserweight Championship match is absolutely brilliant. I'm so happy with that. Juventud Guerrera is joined by Chavo Guerrero Jr. in the ring, and Chavo hugs his Lucha Real stablemate. They've sort of drifted apart in the last few weeks, and of course that was part of the plan to hopefully surprise Sugar Shane with the appearance of Chavo Guerrero, and he has helped him retain the World Cruiserweight Championship. Now, a very, very poor segment rating, but we do not care one bit after such an incredible spectacle that was the Cruiserweight Championship match. We then get a not so good segment here, but Shane McMahon is shown stood outside his locker room as Scott Hudson asks him about his match with Lance Storm later tonight in a last man standing match. I'm just remembering what this segment is now, and I did expect better from this. Shane McMahon says there's been a lot of talk in the build up to Starrcade 2001, but tonight isn't a night for him to say any words. McMahon puts over the parts of the show that he's managed to catch between his preparation, but says now is the time for his full focus. He has the final touches of his preparation to complete, but promises that Lance Storm is going to realise that the punishment he'll receive in the match tonight is worse than any fine, suspension or firing could have ever been. But we're really putting across here how important this is to Shane McMahon. He's been the owner, sat behind a desk for the first 6 months, and now he has to do something that he didn't want to do or didn't think he'd have to do, and that is potentially put one of his employees in his place. Elsewhere, Paisley is shown stood outside the locker room of Lance Storm, knocking on the door but getting no answer. She says that it seems like we won't be hearing from Storm before his match with Shane McMahon tonight, and looks to send back to the ring. However, as she does this, Andrew Martin and Christian Cage are shown leaving the locker room of their fellow Canadian. Paisley asks the new World Tag Team Champions if they have any insight on Lance Storm's preparation for this match. Christian Cage instead takes the time to gloat about how they became the new World Tag Team Champions earlier, and, well, wait and see for what Lance Storm's got planned for Shane McMahon. This does set up another segment that we've got before the Lance Storm Shane McMahon match as well, but it also just gives us a chance to put the new champions on screen again, which is never a bad thing in my opinion. We then go into Diamond Dallas Page versus Mike Awesome. I did hope that this would at least break 70, but yeah, the wrestling isn't very good and the crowd aren't very into it, so it's unfortunate. There probably would have been a lot of video packages on tonight's show. There always is on pay-per-views, but I just don't see the point in putting an extra 5-6 segments in on the show that's already full, so you can just assume that in the time between matches we do get recaps and whatnot. That's perhaps covered in the non-wrestling time, but this is very much about Mike Awesome being put down by Diamond Dallas Page in the build-up, so you would perhaps expect that Mike Awesome might get the win tonight, but I really am not happy with the booking that I've done of Diamond Dallas Page so far, and it would have probably pushed us into having too many heel victories in the big matches, and I don't think people are going to like this considering the sort of semi-burial that we've done of Mike Awesome. But DDP defeats Mike Awesome. He escapes an attempted Awesome Bomb, hits him with a diamond cutter, and as simple as that, in 11 minutes and 37, a clean victory for Diamond Dallas Page. Now, it's an open match, and yeah, designed to tell a story, so I probably limited this a little bit, so that's probably why it's not quite got a 70. If we did this as a Nitro main event and set it to steal the show, it might do better. Mike Awesome reaching a low point here, it has to be said, as he is defeated by Diamond Dallas Page. I do have big plans for Mike Awesome in 2002. I don't even trust myself when I'm saying that, so I don't expect anybody viewing to trust me either. Diamond Dallas Page celebrates a huge victory with the fans, a hard-fought win, which certainly brought the best out of Mike Awesome. Don't want to downplay his performance in any way. We did have him do those moves that he used to pull out in ECW that we haven't really seen in his run as Lance Storm's enforcer. He's been very much booked as a big man throughout 2001, so to see him break out the dives over the top rope, the hugely athletic moves he does, an attempted big splash from the top rope, stuff like that, should hopefully have the fans realising there's a little bit more to Mike Awesome than we realise. But while Mike Awesome can take heart from the level of performance he had, he almost beat Diamond Dallas Page on a number of occasions. The fact that his very best, the best we've seen of him all year, wasn't good enough may actually add salt to the wound the other way, but DDP doing well in a post-match segment where he just has to celebrate. We then get a segment before the Lance Storm versus Shane McMahon match. The commentators switching attention to that when we hear of a developing incident in the back. Arn Anderson is shown heading to where we saw Shane McMahon preparing earlier, rushing into the room to tell him that he's just been told that Scott Steiner has walked out of the building, adding to this unpredictable, chaotic aura that Scott has had since coming back to the company. Arn Anderson says that he hasn't been able to confirm whether this is true or not, but Obviously, Shane's due to head to the ring right now, so he just wants to know what's the backup plan. If that is the case, Shane is forced out of his very clear focus to deal with this incident. Of course, we put over how important his preparation was to show that just moments before his match, being taken out of that preparation would be a big deal. However, when he storms out the room to figure out whether this is true or not, we see Andrew Martin and Christian Cage in the background laughing. They are clearly behind this false report, as the commentators assure us that they'll give us word on Scott Steiner's whereabouts just as soon as we can, but this is a setup just to try and put Shane off moments before the match. Lance Storm then makes his entrance, at which point the commentators do confirm that Scott Steiner has been located, but of course that stress and having to take his eye off the ball just before his match will not help Shane McMahon going into a good match. I'm happy with that, actually. I did worry that Shane McMahon might not be able to bring as good of a level of performance on the night, and we do see that he was visibly tiring towards the end. We do get the crowd buzzing with this though, and the creative finish was a success. Now it advances a hell of a lot of storylines, some of which I'm not sure that it should be advancing, but we get the usual. Early on, Lance Storm's trying to make this a wrestling match, trying to take out the limbs of Shane McMahon, hoping that eventually he will not be able to get back up. But Shane is able to take it to the level that we expect it to, so going all around the ringside area, some brawling in the back, hopefully an equivalent spot to that famous belly-to-belly with Kurt Angle putting Shane McMahon into the glass. And if you've seen that match, if you've seen his match with Steve Blackman, you know the type of match that Shane McMahon was having around this time, and the finish very much plays into that. Lance Storm will not stay down, Shane McMahon will not stay down, and this car crash match had to have the crazy bump from Shane McMahon. This match completely degenerates when Mike Awesome comes out to try and attack Shane McMahon. However, further cementing his face turn from earlier, as Mike sets up to put Shane through a table with a powerbomb, having just recovered from his defeat to Diamond Dallas Page. Buff Bagwell comes out and is able to take Mike out, hits him with a second blockbuster through a table on the night, which means that he is no longer involved. From here, Shane McMahon can take control and takes Lance to the side of the stage, where he climbs up a giant structure. It looks as though Shane is perhaps willing to sacrifice himself. It could be a double down here if he does put Lance Storm through this piece of the set that he's going to before he can dive down. However, Andrew Martin comes out. This is when Shane is just about to make his dive. He obviously pauses and is kind of stuck in no man's land, but thankfully Sean O'Haire can come out and he's able to fight Andrew Martin off. Shane then does his sign of the cross and he's ready to take the huge dive, but Christian Cage has hidden himself, and with Chuck Palumbo unable to come out and do anything about it, he pulls Lance Storm away, meaning that Shane McMahon takes that crazy bump. It looks like he's not been injured, or my user character has not been injured in the course of this. Christian Cage is able to help Lance back to his feet and almost holds him up as the referee counts the 10 fall, and Lance Storm in a superb match defeats Shane McMahon. But this was the reason I did the last man standing. I didn't really like the idea of Lance pinning Shane McMahon, and of course we needed that outside involvement. I think a lot of this show has been overbooked, it has to be said, but I'm happy with my booking decision, so it's up to you what you think of that. But a really, really good match. Hopefully it doesn't leave us sort of in a bad position where the crowd are a little bit burnt out. Going into the main event, Lance Storm is held up after the match is complete by Andrew Martin and Christian Cage, but the action isn't over as balls this up here. So we're going to have to say that Chuck Palumbo comes out when Christian is holding Lance up, and Chuck has his arm in a sling or whatever because he was hurt. He had that serious arm injury earlier, but he sort of runs off Christian Cage. We then get Sean O'Haire having dealt with Andrew Martin coming back. It is too late, but the former World Tag Team Champions do want to check on their friend Shane McMahon, of course. They go back all the way to the first episodes of Nitro where we establish this friendship. Lance Storm crawls back to the ring, kind of trying to get out of the heat there. He's barely able to stand and potentially in shock at what he had just managed to escape. Imagine if Christian Cage hadn't been there. Lance Storm's career may well have been over. He has tried to make the life of Shane McMahon a living hell for the past 6 months. His true reckoning, of course, may be yet to come, because This has done nothing to calm the issues between the two. For now, however, Lance Storm is the victor and Shane McMahon may well be permanently damaged. The WCW owner is stretchered out and his long-term friends, as we said, Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, leaving alongside him on that stretcher. Now, this isn't a good segment and I've totally messed it up, but however we get there, the idea is that as Shane's stretchered away, Chuck and Sean... You could have at least saved that for the main event, couldn't they? I'm hoping these fireworks are still going off for the main event. They are leaving with Shane as he is stretchered out, and we give this the time that it deserves. I think it's 4-minute segment. Yeah, 4-minute segment in total. So we do have that sort of palate cleanser of the commentators filling in the gaps, so we're not straight into the next match. We do go into a video package that at the last minute does lose heat to the storyline, though. The angle idea was a success, so I'm glad that gave it a boost, but yeah, not what we wanted. A video package hypes up the main event with footage from March 26, 2001 and Booker T's now controversial victory over Scott Steiner from the last ever Nitro, or, well, it's obviously not the last ever Nitro, but to people in this reality, it was the last ever Nitro, but it's replayed on TV for the very first time with a look back at the heated rivalry which has developed over the last few months, and we obviously include the involvement of Ric Flair in this. Particular focus is placed on the attack of Stevie Ray by Scott Steiner just over a week before this huge match, so it was already a very heated rivalry, but this has made it personal. The commentators say that tonight has already been a night which will go down in the annals of history, and we still have one of the biggest World Heavyweight Championship matches in recent history to come. Now, I'm gonna say that Scott Steiner and Stevie Ray do have this heated moment in the pre-match, and I'm going to remove Stevie Ray from the commentary position actually for this match, because I think that negative momentum could knock further points off it, and I don't want that to be the case. We do have a segment before the main event, however, as just moments before he goes out, Arn Anderson approaches Ric Flair, making last-minute checks that everything is good and he is prepared to do his job tonight. Ric Flair assures Arn Anderson that he is and asks how Shane McMahon is. Arn says that Shane has been taken to hospital in an ambulance. Sean O'Haire's gone with him, and he's in a really bad way after what happened. Rick says that that's a real shame, but that's probably the best place for him right now. Besides, between the two of them, Arn and Rick have got this covered. The two men then shake hands, and Flair takes a deep breath, turns his attention to make his entrance, and then we come back to ringside where Ric Flair, of course, makes his entrance to be the special guest enforcer for this Starrcade main event that gets an 82, so I'm really happy with that. We used a creative finish, which is brilliant. The storyline wasn't that good either, and the two men don't click, but we do get the crowd buzzing just because we sent them out to try and steal the show, I think, and Booker T gets a 74, Scott Steiner gets a 59, but for whatever reason it is, maybe the heat to the world title storyline, maybe Ric Flair's involvement and the association of his storyline, and the successful creative finish, an 82 just seems insane to me for this match. I know I shouldn't be second guessing the actual good stuff that happens on the show, but I guess we've got all these boosts for the speech that I did for it being the season finale, so obviously the guys taking on board just how important this match was. So good on Booker T, good on Scott Steiner. I didn't actually keep track of what our best performances on the night were, so I'm thinking it's probably going to be Christian, Andrew Martin and Booker T who get the praise, but good wrestling and fantastic heat carries this match in 14 minutes and 10. The match is designed so the wrestlers can go out and steal the show, and during the match Booker T has the match won, hits the bookend and pins Scott Steiner. However, Ric Flair pulls Charles Robinson out of the ring. Charles Robinson argues with him, what the hell are you doing? And Ric Flair knocks the referee out. Booker T obviously goes to the outside, absolutely. Yeah, Scott Steiner's music's not supposed to be playing yet, so yeah, the sirens can wait. Booker T goes out to the ring to argue with Ric Flair, what on earth are you doing? But from behind then, Scott Steiner is able to roll out the ring and hit Booker T with his steel pipe. He then returns him to the ring. It says hits the Steiner screwdriver here. I'm going to be honest, what that move is doesn't quite spring to mind. And I did want him to put him in the recliner and for Ric Flair to call for the bell, although that might be a bit screw job. So I'm glad that it's a pinfall finish. Booker T is taken out, and the overriding story coming out of the show is that Ric Flair turns on Booker T and Scott Steiner wins the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Now there's one comment and a bit of feedback that I've got for myself, but I'm going to look at the final screen before I say that. The final segment of the show is Scott Steiner having his arm raised by Ric Flair. The commentators putting over their shock. Stevie Ray is not disgusted because he wasn't on commentary for that match, and they can't believe what's just gone down in this main event. Ric Flair, the dirtiest player in the game. I feel like it's one of them where the commentators are going to be surprised, the roster are going to be surprised, Shane McMahon's going to be surprised, but nobody watching is going to be surprised because a leopard cannot change its spots. Ric Flair is the dirtiest player in the game, and Scott continues laying boots into the downed Booker T. Perhaps the image that we get from the usual WCW heelish moments, the trash being thrown into the ring as Ric Flair just embraces what I hope is a negative reaction. Stevie Ray comes back out from being sent to the back, and he's obviously not happy with this. Emotions taking over, but he too gets beaten down while trying to come to the aid of his brother with Starrcade 2001 and the year 2001 in World Championship Wrestling coming to an end. We have a new WCW World Champion, the result of a plot perfectly executed by the dirtiest player in the game, Ric Flair, and people have been asking for a while for the big storyline or the big moment, the hook that could carry us through the next 6 months. Well, the idea is to go into 2002 with what I know is a bit of a played out concept, the power struggle, but at the same time, I think that in terms of getting us where we need to be, Ric Flair on one side, Shane McMahon on the other, where that potentially leads, I think it's going to be a good storyline, even if I do agree with perhaps some people feeling it was a little bit of an obvious swerve. And the feedback I'm going to give myself is that screwy finish in the main event. Screwy finish in Lance Storm versus Shane McMahon. Clean finish between DDP and Mike Awesome. Juventud Guerrera screwy finish. Lots of interference in Sabu and Jerry Lawler. Dustin Rhodes and Steve Corino, an overbooked finish. The Real Canadians and Natural Born Thrillers, not too overbooked. Actually, I will let myself off for that. And the first two matches of the night weren't too bad. So not as bad as I initially thought, but the later matches for what's supposed to be the blow-off to all these big feuds and stuff, you do expect maybe a little bit more clean booking. You could argue there's far too much interference in this, but we are dealing with an Attitude Era-esque show, to be fair, so I'm trying not to be too harsh on myself, but I'm sort of just preempting criticism here, aren't I? I knew what I was getting myself in for when I booked it, but hopefully sometimes you book it in the game, and then when you're actually talking through it, you realise quite how egregious you've been with the outside involvement. And it is actually the three Canadian guys, the real Canadians, not like Mike Awesome, who get praised for great performances. Lance Storm seems pleased, Andrew Martin seems pleased, Christian Cage seems pleased. It's shocking that Shane McMahon's in any position to be giving out praise post-match after the huge bump that he took, the only crazy bump on the night. Nearly 3 million made in pay-per-view revenue, and our ticket sales and merchandise cover all of our expenditure for the night, meaning that we do make an overall profit of nearly $3 million on this show, getting our finances up to $7,362,317. Don't know why I had to be quite so specific there, but it's just good to see us making a profit for a change, so I'm going to absolutely savour that. Gaining popularity in every region in Australia, every region in Canada, and most importantly, every region in the United States. I'm not going to do a media scrum because, well, I don't think they did them in 2001, but also Shane McMahon going for a press conference after that match kind of hurts the kayfabe of what we've just done. But that is WCW Starrcade 2001. The next video is going to be that State of WCW address. I did one after 3 months. I'm now doing one after 6 months, and I'm going to try and just put absolutely everything that I possibly can. If there's anything you want to see in that, let me know, and I will try and cover it in that video. I will look at the pay-per-view buy rate, to be fair. Great viewing figures for WCW Starrcade 2001. 2 million buys. Might be more buys than any pay-per-view ever did in reality. I'm not sure. It's very close to it anyway. The second best show that we've done. If only it could have been a point higher, but who can forget that historic Booker T versus Kanyon match from November. I'll show where it lands on our top 100s as well. The third best match that we've done. Just one other match on the night making it to the top 20. But as I said, we are doing that recap of 2001. Look to 2002 video next, so I'm not going to do anything else on this because I'll be going through the entire top 100s, our entire roster. I'll be showing you their titles, I'll be showing you everything in both WCW and the outside wrestling world, so I will leave it there with what I hope has been an enjoyable WCW Starrcade. That's the year done. We begin 2002 in the next episode, and I hope that you'll join me for that. Thank you for watching, and we'll see what 2002 has in store for for World Championship Wrestling.